I'll jump in then and sort of progress the conversation a little bit into Neoplatonism, because I started with Platonism, but the thing is, Platonism, that project was advanced, right, and that's what became Neoplatonism. So essentially, and that starts with Plotinus. And so his dates are 204 to 270 Common Era, right? That's Plotinus. So Greek, Egyptian, and so I always want to go into the history. I'll just try to stick to the ideas though, because if I start talking about the history and the peoples and all that, then Neoplatonism essentially is just pretty much after Jesus, right? Like shortly after Jesus, after the Hellenistic period, during the peak of the Roman Empire's influence, essentially is where Neoplatonism is the contender, essentially with Christianity, is what it sort of happened, right? Those two kind of battled it out. See, here I go. I'm talking the history. Anyway, so Neoplatonic takes Platonic and adds two more worlds to it. So in Plato, we have the world of facts and the world of truths, which probably should be said the other way around if we're speaking Platonically, because the world of truths, is where the world of facts come from. But so the Neoplatonists add two more layers to this worldview. Okay, so their first layer is the Hylic level, which is the world of material facts. Hylic was a term that was taken over by Aristotle because the Greeks didn't have a word for material. So hyle was the word for wood. So Aristotle repurposed that word to be able to talk about this idea of material being a conceptual thing that exists, right? That's not wood, but that was the closest Greek word. So the Hylic level is the world of material facts, right? The densest, heaviest, what we look at through our factoscope. That's what science is looking at. And so science is trying to cram everything into the Hylic level, right? I just had to throw that in there. So level 2 is the psychic level, right? The world of individual minds, right? This is where this level is the level that essentially was added by the Neoplatonists, right? Because the third level is the noetic level. So the new sphere, right? And so this is the noetic is the world of timeless truths, right? So that's Plato's world of truths, right? And then the fourth level is the Hanatic level, which is the one, which is controversial because the early church fathers reworked Neoplatonism to be taken seriously by the Roman intellectuals of the time, because they were seen as like yokel hillbillies, basically. And they were trying to be like, no, we're intelligent too. So they took Neoplatonism and reworked it, and they turned the Hanatic level, the one, the monad, into God, in the Christian God. But in a Neoplatonic conception of the one is not God. It's not a thing that exists. It's the process by which all things exist. But it's not. It's a lot like I'm reminded of when I'm reading about it. It's a lot like the Buddha talking about what enlightenment is, right? And he'll never say what it is. He'll only say what it's not, because words can't get to it, right? So as soon as you try to define it, it's already not that thing. So all you can say about it is what it's not. And that's kind of like what the one is. It's not anthropomorphic, right? It's not like the Yahweh, the God of the Christians, is an anthropomorphic God, conceived of like as a human in a way, like same with like the Greek gods are the same. We see them as human through a human, like they act like humans, right? God is like this deity that has like rules, and he has a program for you to follow and all like that. So anyways, let me back up and just give you the 4 levels again. Hylic level is the material level, right? The psychic level is actually in between the world of facts and the world of truths, and that's in fact the level that our minds inhabit. So we're in between the human mind and that's also where the soul is conceived of. It exists on the psychic level, in between the hylic and the noetic, right? In between the world of truths and facts is where we exist. And then the fourth level, again, is the hanatic, which is the one. So it's not God. It's not God. It's not anything. It's just a process by which things come into existence. So this is the Neoplatonic. This is what essentially Iamblichus perfected, the relationship between the pagan Greek philosophical conception of reality and the lived experience of like spiritual life. Essentially, he kind of married them, and he was the first person that was able to do that. Iamblichus was. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a lot. It's a lot to throw out there. But I wanted to do that just because I wanted to at least put out there the idea that the Platonic conception of the world of truths and the world of facts was further evolved to become the hylic level, the psychic level, the noetic level, and hanatic level.
Right. Yeah. And that correlates with like yogic conceptions of reality as well, with there's overlap there with what you're saying, and like the gunas and the tattvas and the different ways of understanding, the layers of reality as well, just to kind of that's what I was thinking of when you were sharing that. And then it looks like too that they correspond to one another, like do the humans correspond to the hylic, and like do they each have a correspondence to it?
Yeah, and I know. Yeah, there's a lot. And it's really the number 4. I mean, this number is, the cube, right? Is in occult thinking anyway. It's kind of like the earth element, right? And in tarot, the pentacles, right? So it's actually 5, because all of this stuff comes into being here at the material level, right? Like, it's what's real, in the sense of verifiable, factual, right? It's what is factual, in fact. So, but yeah, in Neoplatonism, it corresponds to gods, daemons, heroes, and humans, right? So humans would be the hylic level, right? And then heroes would be the psychic level. Daemons would be the noetic, and then God would be the hanatic. But it's not gods. In fact, it's gods, but not. Again, this is very contentious, and Iamblichus is the one who sort of solidified what Neoplatonism was, because for him, right, the hanatic was 12. Well, there's 12 gods, but it's not. But the one is not a god. It's complicated. It's very
right.
It's very complicated. Conceptual system of reality, and so much of this is not provable, right? Because it doesn't exist in the hylic.
Right. Which is what I mean, I think that's really interesting too, because it's almost like from the perspective of only the hylic, it could be seen as a way of trying to make meaning or organize, reality in a way that has value to perhaps to whoever like it resonates with, or whatever cultural paradigm is disseminating that, right, as an organizational or structural way of understanding our experience or consciousness and human consciousness in general. And that, it is like culturally situated and historically situated, but also, people, it may not be perceived as truth. But what I think is kind of cool about what you were saying about the 4 is that's a concrete, within the geometrics of the material or concrete reality. You're kind of interested in like architecture, Aaron, and that kind of the overlap between like what they call is it sacred numerology, and and how that starts to mirror, and it's not causal, but again, it's like some of the more esoteric understanding systems of understanding are mirroring the very literal architecture of the universe in some way?
Yep. Well, that I would want to. At this point, you could go into the Neoplatonic, or sorry, the Platonic solids, and what those are with respect to all this, because that's kind of where all of this comes full circle, is with the Platonic solids. Because the thing with that is that the Platonic solids are scientific, right? Like they're essentially crystals. These are the shapes that nature makes that composes the Hylic level, that composes the material reality that we look at as scientists with our factoscopes. That we're looking at the Platonic solids.
So I assume that has like. Go ahead.
I was going to ask Ben. Ben, what do you make of that? Like, have you? I know you've had to have run into the Platonic solids and studied them some because of the tattoo on your arm.
Yeah, I've definitely looked into them, and I do like. I guess this kind of touches again on my like appreciation for like pattern recognition in humans. Like noticing these like numerological patterns, noticing these geometric patterns, is deeply ingrained in our like human psyche, in our minds, and also like our existence, our reality, right? So I think, using these as like symbols to represent like complex ideas that we can talk about is extremely, beneficial for us to be able to like try to talk about reality in these complex ways, especially when we get into like metaphysics. So yeah, I mean, obviously as like a scientist, I'd be like, how do we test it? Let's try to figure out how we test it. But again, a lot of these things are like things we can only really theorize, at least right now, and try to discuss and make sense out of. So yeah, I mean it's definitely an interesting idea, and I really do love like all of the pattern recognition, and I think that's what draws me the most to like astrology, is like noticing all of these different patterns and not necessarily like applying causation to them, but saying like, hey, how is this like a reflection of maybe something in my psyche or in the human psyche or culture, that we're experiencing. So I think there's a lot of power just in like that symbolism and pattern recognition, in and of itself. So I think that's like kind of the thing that stands out most to me.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit in the notes here, and I wanted to just spit some facts out that to me are just mind-bending. You can't hardly make sense of. Like you can try to think about these numbers, right? So I'm just gonna go into them. So we were talking about motion and relativity and our experience of time, and I talked about the Earth's diurnal rotation, the Earth's orbital speed, and then of course the Moon and its orbital speed and its phases and all that, right? So here are some numbers in relation to all that to sort of situate ourselves in the Hylic level of our universe, right? So Earth's spin at the equator, the Earth spins at 1,000 miles per hour. So right now we're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, right? Probably we're going to be a little less than that because we're north, so our diameter up here is a little smaller, so we're going to be spinning slower. But so I don't know, 800 miles per hour. Who knows? But at the equator, 1,000 miles per hour is how fast the Earth's spinning. That's generating. What does that mean to us, right? That's generating day and night. That speed. If Earth's speed were slower or faster, then our day and night would be different, right? That's the diurnal, and all biological life is pinned to that fact that the Earth's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the Earth's equator. Like, okay, so that's one speed that's interesting, right? Okay, that you can kind of get an idea. I mean, that's really fast, right? Like a jet is like what 500-600 miles per hour. So I mean, that's pretty damn fast, right? At least like a passenger jet, right? So then the next one, this really interesting number, is the orbital speed. Okay, so we're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. We're orbiting the sun, right? The Earth is actually traveling through space at 66,666 miles per hour. Now, that's an interesting number. Any Christians out there are going to be like, what? It's the number of the beast. Well, that's how fast Earth is traveling through space around the sun. 66,000 miles per hour. Now we're getting into the territory of, can you really conceive of how fast that is? I mean, I can't really. I mean, how do you understand 66,000 miles per hour and make sense out of it? So then, to just kind of close this loop, right? Because there's another speed by which we're traveling, and that's the speed that the solar system is traveling through the Milky Way at, right? That speed is obviously, we don't even know exactly. I've found different sources. Somewhere between 490,000 miles per hour and 514,000 miles per hour. That's how fast the sun is traveling through the galaxy. Now we're into territories of, we're traveling at that speed. Does that mean anything, though? Okay, and that's not all. There's one more speed. The Milky Way itself, our galaxy, is traveling through the universe at 1.3 million miles per hour. And it has been doing that since the beginning of fucking time. What distances have we traveled?
It didn't feel like that.
Oh, well, because it's almost meaningless. I just bring all this up as a thought experiment to talk about the relativity of time and space. So we need to talk about causality. If this is all truthful, as far as science knows, truthfully factual numbers and speeds that compose our actual reality. Completely meaningless, though, in terms of lived experience.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is like, and are you asking like kind of like, what does it mean? Like it's all true, but what does it mean? Or what meaning do we draw from it?
Yeah, all of the above. And also, like, I guess I'm asking people to just consider. All right. We're traveling at 1.3 million miles per hour through the universe right now, and have been since the beginning of the planet, since the beginning of our solar system. Like once things cooled enough to form solid and the solar system happened, right? Like what? The Big Bang supposedly 14 billion years ago. So, I don't know, the last 13 billion years, I don't know what, but the point is we've been moving at 1.3 million miles per hour the whole time, all of human history, through the universe. Where the fuck are we going? If the universe is expanding, right? As science tells us, the universe is expanding, right? What the fuck is it expanding into? Nothing?
And that.
Well,
right.
What the fuck is nothing? And if we're talking about nothing, then how the hell are we going to talk about causality if we're expanding into nothing?
Above my pay grade, that's for sure.
I don't think it is, Ben.
I was like,
I really
Ben, you got something on that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have some physics friends who I'm sure could
Yeah.
Put our minds in knots. But yeah, I think the important thing too with like speed, with like speed, it's a relation of a relation, right? Because you're relying on time and space with speed. So every one of those speeds you mentioned was a different relationship.
That's right.
Right? From us to a different point. So figuring out how those kind of all go together and like the impacts of those different things, definitely from my knowledge, without like some great physics understanding, I have no idea what it means. I have no idea what it means.
Well, that's the point, is to think about it.
Well, and we're getting into almost like astrological territory if we think about that. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, for that. It's like, because, and I just had this thought, right? If we think about it, like we're using just the framework of like Jungian psychology, right? The idea of like the masculine, the feminine, and that reverberates throughout many different like understandings of the polarity between opposites, right? So masculine, feminine is just one of them, but ideally, like within the like Jungian framework, we have like anima, animus, right? And it's kind of like the idea of even, or if you look at like Vedic history or Vedic religion, you've got Shiva, Shakti, or so you have kind of this masculine nature of the universe and the feminine nature, right? And it has nothing to do with biological sex or sexuality. It's just yin yang. And so the reason it kind of feels like you're getting into astrological territory there is that all the like the question that you pose of, well, what does all that mean? Because, and Ben, you just nailed it with like, it's a relation to a relation. So these are different energetics that are happening when we talk about the time space continuum and relationship between these planets. So you could think of like astrology, one way you might think of it or consider it is like, is it the anima of the animus? Is it the intuition of the rational? There's a vibration on my head, but
Who's that?
it's probably that's okay.
That's
I
God
just was
speaking.
like, they're beaming me up. I can feel it. They're beaming me up.
Go, Susan.
I've been waiting for this since I saw my first episode of Star Trek at 7. But no, but no, so that there's this kind of, if logos and logic is valuable, right? It's not like logos and logic is no longer valuable if like intuition and this is getting right into the 4 types, the Jungian types here, but that one could be there's a relationship between the two, like they are mirroring each other, where again it's just a theory, there is no way to test it, but it could be posited that astrology kind of fills in some of the poetry and the language and the meaning and the like the narrative of what it could even be poetry. I mean, it doesn't mean that those physical relationships aren't happening. But just like one person can't define a certain specific meaning for their life that's going to be the same as anyone else's, no astrology, there is no capital A astrology that's going to be like the truth of your chart. It's a conversation and a relationship to a third, basically a transcendental third or a point of meditation, but it just so happens to have a connection to the causal universe. It isn't causing, the astrology isn't causing. It's a bit of a reflection and a little bit of a dialectic within itself, so anyway,
dance.
I just wanted to right
A cosmic dance.
Yeah.
Ben, you got anything come to mind there?
Or? No, I mean, I still am vibing with the symbolism, and I totally am on board with the like descriptive properties of all of these different relationships. That's totally cool with me, and that makes complete sense. Again, I think there's a lot of power in that, being able to like reflect on aspects of reality and recognize those in ourselves or others, and I still think that's valuable. Where we draw from that and the things people bring into their own reality from that are consequences that I think ethically we have to consider, like how we're delivering those realities. But I still think it can be extremely beneficial for people just to recognize those like in reality, these patterns in reality, and recognize them within themselves. And like that helps with connectedness to nature, to others, just to reality. So I think that, in and of itself can be really powerful and beneficial for people.
So thank you for saying that. So would you say that the ethical question comes in? I think that's really interesting. The ethical question comes in its relation to power, that power of knowledge or truth that can be disseminated to somebody about their chart, that there's ethical questions around that as far as like how it's delivered, you said, like how meaning is ascribed to somebody else's life based on interpretation of like the astrologer, for example.
Exactly. And I think it's like, that goes back to my like first question of descriptive versus, I think the actual correct term would be prescriptive. So descriptive versus prescriptive, right? Like we could describe some pattern and, help people reflect on how they may see that in themselves or others. But if we were to like then prescribe some, some whatever it is, for benefit or worse or whatever the intention,
Mhm.
that result is still like a potential ethical consideration in how we like that's like the is ought, gap again. It's like here's a truth about the universe and a pattern of reality. What is the ought? How do we apply that description to a prescription? So I think that's where it's like, and I think that was the last conversation I had heard from you two, is like how do you approach that in an ethical way? And I think that comes back to like how we practice and how we like speak to other people, the language we use, essentially. So yeah, I mean, I think like any tool or any ideology, it could be used for good or bad, depending on the
Oh,
person.
yeah.
It's the same as like AI or science. I could use science to, say some horrible thing if I wanted, and try to obscure it and make it seem really scientific.
Yeah,
Or I
like
could use science
eugenics.
to, yeah, or I could use science to, like try to save the world and, like stop global warming. Like there's so many different ways to use
Like
these tools
eugenics.
that we.
That's what the Nazis
Oh,
thought they
geez.
were doing, was saving the world. I mean, I had to open that can of
Yeah.
worms. Well, I got another, like with the whole mind expanding numbers I threw out about our speed through the universe and galaxy and on Earth and around the sun, all that. So a way to kind of bring that down to Earth to sort of highlight the cosmos being like the cosmos itself is basically order, right? It's also, I think, like a gem, an adornment, right? The cosmos is an adornment, is how the Greeks kind of conceived of it. But it's also order, and the order part is the part for me that's like, how is it possible, right, for us to be traveling at 1.3 million miles per hour into a universal nothingness, and yet we can have this conversation and it makes sense of our reality, right? So, strictly speaking, in terms of astrology and astronomy, right? That's where I'm going to go next, because astrology was not separated from astronomy until pretty much about Copernicus, Galileo. Like before that, right? Before the 1500s, in order to have been an astrologer, you also had to be a mathematician, which meant you were an astronomer. Nobody was using number, right? Nobody was using mathematics for anything outside of astronomy for the most part. Like that's why mathematics evolved due to astronomy, which was astrology back then, right? Why are there 360 degrees in a circle? It could have been 5 degrees in a circle. Right? The Mesopotamians assigned 360 degrees to a circle, right? Well, with really good reason, and it has to do with the number 12. I won't get into all that because I'm trying to get to a point here, which is to talk about the cardinal directions, also 4, back to the number 4, right? In Platonism, we saw that there are 4 levels of existence, right? So in astrology, again, keep in mind, just back up and just think about the speed by which our solar system is traveling through the Milky Way galaxy, right? Is traveling 490,000 miles per hour. Yet, in relation to north, right? That relationship is stable, okay? And it's based on the Earth's axial tilt, which is 23 degrees. That axis stays stable in relation to the sun and our orbit around the sun, right? That tilt, we're tilted towards, that's what the pole star, right? In the celestial, sort of navigation, right? The pole star is what Earth's axis is tilted towards, right? North. And it's always tilted towards north. That never changes. And that's true for the whole planet, right? And in terms of astrology, that's the sign of Cancer. We're always tilted towards that sign of Cancer, the Earth's axial tilt, right? So the opposite of that is Capricorn. And you see that with the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And the reason being that's where the sun stops its latitude, it stops its declinational changing. So it's moving up and down in the horizon, the sun is throughout the year, and it stops at Capricorn. It stops going down and starts moving back up. And at the Cancer, Tropic of Cancer, it's the other way around, right? It stops moving up at the summer solstice and starts decreasing its declination. This relationship has been true since the planet started spinning and orbiting around the sun. And all that's been true, right, in relation to these astronomical speeds by which we're traveling through the universe, right? All of those relationships, and because then you can talk about east and west, right? So you're talking about Aries being 0 degrees of celestial longitude, right? Speaking of the ecliptic, it's 0 degrees is where it starts. The year essentially starts at 0 degrees Aries, and that's spring. That's the spring equinox. So at that point, day and night are equal. And the opposite side is Libra, the sign of Libra in the west. That's the autumnal equinox. Days and nights are equal, right? Then with the summer solstice, you have the longest day, and the winter solstice, you have the longest night. Those are the cardinal directions, right? North, south, east, west. And those directions are defined in astrology, right? Those are the 4 angles that define the horoscope or nativity. So the reason I dropped all that down right there is because what I'm saying is that in the language of astrology, we begin to take the meaning out of what does it mean for us to be traveling at these astronomical speeds into a universal void. And yet at the same time, these directions never change for us, and they never have, and they never will, not as long as, our solar system exists. So astrology, what it does is it takes meaning out of all of these facts, basically. It's a language of meaning is what it is. And
Cool.
I would drop the mic now, but I don't want to. It's on a stand, so
You don't want to hurt anybody's ears.
Metaphorically, mic drop. I don't. I'm being stupid.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, so
anyone want to take that and run?
I would. What's that?
No, I was
sorry.
I just interrupted you after you started. So.
Oh no, it's okay.
Please.
I was just trying to pull up. I was pulling up Ben's chart because I didn't have it. I guess the thing I would say about that is, I think you connected it nicely as far as kind of how it might function and its relationship to the physical aspect and the astronomy. I think that was like a pretty nice overview there for like how they're connected. And with Jung's 4 types that he came up with, right? The thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensing, and the types. And then I think you put in also the elements, and, like in Vedic or in yogic philosophy and cosmology, it's, you've got the tattvas, like the elements, right? Earth, wind, fire, water, and then air, which would be ether. So like the 5th element. But you put those in the notes. And I think that's kind of interesting too, because like I'm thinking about the conversation with Ben, and even, how very different people can be in their way and in their approach to reality and the way that they see it. And like I would think of Ben as being kind of a much a thinking type, you too, Aaron, right? Like y'all are both you have a strong, Jung would probably say you have a very like dominant thinking function. And so along with that, you have the importance of understanding and almost a scientific mind just by its very nature, and then some poor sap comes in and they have like absolutely no tether, no earth, no tether to reality as a thinker would see it. and they're very strong on intuition, right? And they're like flipping tarot cards, and people are coming to them with all of their dreams and problems, and they're trying to help people because they have this really strong intuitive function, you know? So it's like the differences are what make reality and also relationships really, really rich, because we're not usually, you know, in psychological terms or like in Jungian terms, we're not even really drawn to what is the same as us, you know, because of that polarity. So it's kind of, you know, I'm just kind of thinking about the like in the fact that we're going to kind of look at Ben's chart, right? We're going to look at Ben's chart,
Definitely.
um, and that, you know, we have a strong, I would say, a very strong thinking, you know, a very strong thinking. Like the value of logic in the mind is really important, and and you know, the elements, like how do, if we think, and you listed the 4 elements with, you know, solid, liquid, plasma, and gas, that corresponds to the scientific. And then you have a lot of different layers about like what earth energy means in astrology, what water energy signifies, fire, air. Like when you start to talk about somebody's astrology chart, you're looking at like the 4 basic components of matter, and how does that translate into trying to give someone, you know, maybe less metaphysical certainty, but maybe perhaps meaning and a way of reflecting. Like Ben, I love how open you are too, because it's like I haven't heard anything that's like a closed mind, you know. And I think that people who maybe less strong in the thinking function, you know, I value thinking and I value the intellect, but like that isn't my probably my primary, you know, function. It's like I think people can give strong thinkers a bad rap, or judge them, just like some thinkers can be like the intuitive woo-woos over there, you know. But like I also hear like a lot of openness to where do the patterns, like where do we, you know, how can I maybe learn some kind of truth? Maybe it's not a metaphysical truth as I would qualify it, but like where is that and how does that show up for me? And being open to the experience of like looking at your chart and having us reflect on your chart with you, you know, I think that's really cool that, you know, you're here for that. So but it ties in with like, you know, the notes that you have, Aaron, with like, and then the explanation that you just gave, even with like orienting us to the astrology of you know, north, south, east, and west, and Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, and Libra, you know.
Yeah, the
So
astronomy of astrology, or
yeah,
the
yeah.
astronomy for astrologers, essentially. That's one of the areas I'm very, very interested in. The actual mechanics, the celestial mechanics, is what I'm really interested in. So,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I hear you saying, and I have Ben's chart up here, and Ben, you're, I know you don't have all day, so we should definitely jump into your chart. And I think it would be, after the conversation we've had, it could be interesting perhaps for you to see sort of what a professional astrologer and a theoretical astrologer might do with that language.